Hi, everybody. My name is Angie Grove. I'm the director here at the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum, and welcome to our free monthly lecture for September 2025. I'm only going to say one quick thing because then I have three really special people to introduce you to who will then be introducing the speaker. But I will really quickly say thank you to CCTV who is recording this program. Charlie over there, yes, they do a great job. This really helps our program be more accessible to people all over the world who watch the videos on YouTube, as well as the locals who just can't make this time or date or location. So really appreciative for the work that they're doing. Okay, so I am now going to introduce you to three very special people who are relatively new to the homestead. We have these wonderful three interns from the University of Vermont, and this is going to be their very first time introducing the lecture program and the lecture speaker. I know they're going to do amazing. So we have Bryn, Macy, and Allie here.
I've never gone up to a podium before. I feel so professional. Hi, my name's Bryn. I'm a junior, and I'm going to be the new community outreach intern this semester at the homestead. First, I want to thank the sponsors of this program, Richard and Linda Smart. Second, I want to invite everyone here to our upcoming events. On October 18th, we have Flaxtravaganza. It's a harvest reenactment. October 19th is our next free monthly lecture, The Losers of the American Revolution, Loyalists, What They Lost, and Why We Should Care, by Dr. Alexandra Garrett of St. Michael's College. And then finally, on October 25th, we have Spooky Stories at the Homestead. Access to tickets was given to members last week and will be made available to everyone on our website this week.
Hi everyone, my name is Macy. I'm a senior at the University of Vermont, and this semester I am the interpretation intern here at the Homestead.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm a senior at the University of Vermont. This semester I am the public programming intern here at the Homestead, and today we have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker.
Between 1979 and 1993, archaeologists conducted several excavations at the Ethan Allen Homestead, including a multi-summer project led by a graduate student at Boston University that recovered over 60,000 artifacts. These artifacts sat in the museum's attic for almost 35 years, and for the last 2 years, volunteers at the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum have donated numerous hours cataloging and bagging them for submission to the Vermont Archaeology Heritage Center in Barre. Although opportunities for additional work and analysis remain, this presentation reports on the results of opportunities for research recently completed, focusing on what the excavations and artifacts can tell us about the landscape surrounding the Allen Homestead has changed since the 1780s.
So today's speaker is Niels Rinehart, has volunteered for the Ethan Allen Homestead since the fall of 2022, working with Angie Grove and other volunteers cataloging artifacts recovered from the museum's attic. He also serves as an interpretive guide on weekends at the homestead and serves on the collections committee for the museum. Niels worked as a contract archaeologist throughout the Northeast and elsewhere in the U.S. for many years before joining the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. With FPR, Niels manages historic properties at state parks and state forests, consulting with the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation and other stakeholders. He lives in Jericho with his wife, Lauren, and their two sons, Liam and Abe.
Thank you. I just saw I made this screen. I spent a while trying to learn how to do it, and it was supposed to be the flag for the green, but the green is so lurid. I didn't know, because on my home screen it had like a nice dark sort of forest green hue, so it's kind of lost that. Sorry about that. But there was an intent there. So anyway, thank you for the introduction. I wanted to ask Angie to please start to wave her arms if I go over. No, not now, but soon if I do go over, because because it was too long, so I cut a whole bunch of slides, but I didn't actually time it to see if I was within the. So just start to complain if I go on too long. So anyways, great. So So as you just heard, when Angie first came here, she found about 65 or so boxes of artifacts up in the attic, all under tarps and so on, and they'd been there for a long time. And when she opened them up, she found about 63,000 plus artifacts. They were all kept in sandwich bags and film canisters and so on. And no, if you look here at these things, you can date this to probably early, like late 80s, early 90s. I mean, if you're doing some archaeology of the archaeology. But yeah, so she found film canisters and sandwich bags, some notes and so on. And there's also a big stack of these old printouts. I don't know how many here remember, like the one you would have like the spools that would go up. Then you have like the dot matrix thing. It was like the sound of a machine gun or something as it went across the page. So there's that, and there's also these old discs as well. So what was this? So there was a dig that was run here for 4 summers by a grad student from Boston U. And so the goal was, I think, to use this work as her dissertation, and but for one reason or another, it was she left before that was done, and then all of these boxes with all of the the artifacts and so on were then put upstairs, and they sat there for about 30 years or more. So Angie then she reached out to Dr. Jess Robinson, who's the Vermont State archaeologist, and so he works for the State Historic Preservation Office, but he also runs the the Vermont Archaeology Heritage Center in Barre, and this is sort of like to archaeology what the state archives is to documents. So the idea is that it'll house, it houses all of these archaeological collections that have been gathered from across the state, and the idea is to house them in archival conditions and so on, so that they can be there for years and years to come for other folks to go and to do research and so on. So the goal was to be able to prepare all of these boxes to then give or submit, I don't know if give's the right word, but to submit to the Heritage Center. But in order to do that, there were a number of things that had to be done to this collection. So for one, we had to have the appropriate bagging, like film canisters and sandwich bags is not archival quality. So we went and found out like it has to be 4 mil bags. It's this very specific thing, which I found for quite an inexpensive price online. But anyway, so it had to be bagged the right way. We also had to cull the whole thing, meaning they saved everything. They saved all the bricks and the plaster and all this stuff. And although it is important that we note all that stuff, but we don't need to keep it. It doesn't need to be kept in perpetuity. So we had to go and like cull all of that stuff. Also, we needed to create a functioning database. So that spreadsheet you saw was not functioning. It's paper. And it was very old, so we had to create some sort of a functioning database for it. And then we had to have some sort of a report that summarized all of the work that was done and why, and something that would create context there, so that folks in the future who might want to look at it would have, could have an understanding of what was done and why. And Angie then put together a large group of volunteers. I see several of you here, and you work together. So we all worked together for about 2 years, every other Saturday, to bag all of the our artifacts and to tag them and to check them against the catalog. We also, there was money to go into have folks to enter in, so you saw that huge spreadsheet, that was a thick wad of printouts that all had to be hand entered, right? So we had volunteers and others who went and did that. There's also a project to scan all these photographs of work that had been done here before, especially the rehabbing of the house back in the 80s. So there was that, and all this was managed by Angie. And this is a huge task. I don't know, like it just in 4 slides, it might look simple, but it was an enormous amount of work to pull all these folks, together. Here's a list of all these people, and this is just, the organizations here. So the actual list would be much larger, but there was a number of groups and people who were involved in this. So, do I have to point at it? Wait. Oh, there we go. Oh, one thing. So those discs. So my kids always get annoyed because I'm always complaining about anything new that comes out, and it's not like it was back when I was young. It was better, and all that. So these discs, we couldn't read these. Now these have been around for 35 years, and we couldn't find anybody. There wasn't any way to read them. Now that has been around for over 5,000 years, and we can still read it, right? So anyway, so newer is not always necessarily better. All right, so we had the effort to bag and tag all those artifacts, and we made the new catalog. It was digitized, and we culled the collection, but shrank the 65 boxes to like 15 boxes, which is huge, or small but a huge deal. And then also, then we contracted with an organization to write the report. Now the idea was not to do the dissertation that wasn't finished, but rather just to write something that would provide the context so that we could understand what was done and so on, and what potential there might be in the future. So we hired them, and they went ahead and so the goals of their work was to synthesize and summarize what happened, to interpret the stratigraphy, which is very complicated, and I'll talk about that soon. Then also to interpret the assemblage, like who were these people who were here, and what were they doing here, and then also to outline future directions for research. And finally, to produce maybe some information that we could use for an exhibit here. So just as some background here, how far back? All right, so there have been people here in New England for about 12,000 years, going back to the end of the Ice Age. So if you say like each of these is 25 years, that's how many generations there are. That if you go back to the far left-hand corner there, that's like the end of the Ice Age. This is all the generations that have been here. I am him. I guess that's my two kids. But anyway, so we're all here. Now the circle there, that guy at the top, that's like 5,000 years ago, and there's a point up there on the wall that dates back to then, and that's the earliest evidence we have for anybody here at Ethan Allen. But this talk is just about the last 250 years, so these generations here. All right, so to talk about all the rest is like the whole other talks in the whatever. So I'm not going to talk about that here so much. He doesn't show up a lot. Have you ever seen the Ethan Allen Lego set?
No, I just assumed you had just made that image.
No, I Googled it and it came up, the Ethan Allen. So I think you'll have to have it for the
gift shop.
Yeah. So anyway, so he is very important in an historical sense for this property here, obviously, but in terms of the archaeology, there's not going to be much. He was only here for a few years, so there's not. So he's not going to really show up in this because there's not a lot of trash that he ever had an opportunity to leave behind, right? So, but the main thing I wanted to talk about here, so here's the house today. This is from like the southeast corner. This is a picture from about 125 or so years ago, taken from about where the well is in like the southeast corner. So you can see, the house has changed and has been changed a great deal, and then all those structures there are gone. But what I wanted to talk about is how this looks, how maybe the landscape has changed over the last 250 years. So where did they dig? There are four main spots that they checked out. One was the eastern hayfield. They dug a few holes there to sort of see if they could find anything from the old structures that were there. Whoops, sorry, went too far. They also dug some holes on the edge of the terrace to see what sort of evidence they could find for people having thrown things over the edge of the terrace. And they also found the well, and that was actually found by accident. Somebody apparently stepped in it. It was just covered up by something, and somebody fell. I don't know if they fell in or just put their foot through it, but that's how they found the well. So they dug there as well. But the major part of the excavation was in what's called the west lawn, on the west side of the house. So we'll talk a lot about that. So there are two ways to sort of look at the landscape here. The red here are all the holes that they dug over the course of those 4 summers. So you can look first at it horizontally, meaning like the spatial, like how it looks flat on the ground, And then the other way is to look vertically, meaning stratigraphically, how it is from top to bottom. Right, so people they'll often ask, "Oh, so you're an archaeologist. What's the most interesting thing you've ever found?" And I've never had a good answer to that because I study garbage. I study trash, and that doesn't elicit a lot of interesting, like here's a neat piece of trash. It just doesn't really work like. But so what we really do is look for patterns. Like we take garbage and we use patterns in that garbage to try to understand how people in the past, lived and worked and so on. So how can I find patterns across space and also up and down, vertically as well? So first off, our artifact densities. Where was the most stuff found? And there's no question here. It was in the west lawn. Right, it was there's no comparison to any other place across the property, and I'll talk about that soon to explain why that is. Then also, but then I wanted to see. So are there differences in the types of garbage? So if you were to make like 2 broad sort of categories, one being structural stuff, that's like nails, bricks, a window glass, things of that sort. That's one type. The other type being like domestic trash, that being like cups and saucers, pipe stems, things of that sort. Can we see patterns in where people are throwing out this different type of garbage? Now, so what this means is, if you look at on the bottom here, you've got all the holes that were dug here. Their coordinates. On the left there, you've got how much was found in each of those, and you can see here so you've got the blue line is the domestic stuff, and then the orange line is structural. So you can see that there are several holes in which it's mostly structural, and we'll talk a bit about why that might be, like what happened to produce that sort of chart. Once I start to make charts, I just can't stop. I keep wanting to find more and more ways to make charts. So for instance, if you look here, you can see where that arrow is pointing. That's a very high density of domestic stuff, pots and plates and bottled glass and so on. So why is it there? It's in the southwest corner of the west lawn. I don't know, but that's a pattern there. Then you can see here. There we go. So structural stuff, there's a, it's a very dense in the northeast corner of structural debris. Why? I have some ideas which we'll talk about soon. So again, I'm just trying to find patterns, to see what's going on. Now, however, so people are, I should go back here. So people are throwing out garbage, all right? This here is the West Lawn, right? So people were, were throwing out trash there in the West Lawn. But what were the different ways in which people threw out trash? Like today, when you throw out trash, it's that, right? You put it in a bag, and it's out of sight, out of mind, right? I guess it all goes to the Casella place up north or something like that, but it's all gone, right? But in the past, there was no garbage collection. It was just thrown outside. So one way to do this is what's called the sheet midden. So this means you have, there we go. What she's doing, like she steps out her house and she just throws it outside. And so that creates a sheet, right? You've got garbage that's just spread out. And if you find many of the pieces that were found are very small because they were on the ground for a long time period. People are churning them up. They're horses' hooves. There's people's feet because it's just a sheet midden, right? This actually comes from a book from the 1840s in which somebody is talking about how drunk and lazy all the farmers in New England are. It's great prose about how they're all a bunch of drunks, but you see, but this is all, this here is a giant sheet midden, just all that garbage out there. Another way is you can have these, there we go, pit features. So somebody might dig a hole in the ground and then throw their trash in the hole. My wife and I lived in Mozambique for about a year, and we had to dig holes and then throw our trash in the holes, which I found fascinating because there's so many other holes that were there. I kept doing like what you see there, where you dig your hole into an old hole, so you get this very complicated sort of effect there. So there's that type of trash. Then there's also privies, which are actually a great place for trash. I mean, for lots of types of trash. But anyway, so there's that. And then also there was a more complicated thing where somebody might dig a hole and then put in a wall or something like that called a builder's trench as well. So you've got all these different types of pits and trash that are being formed all over that West Lawn. So you see those different type, I showed you those two concentrations there, right? We had like the big concentration of structural trash. So somebody at some point, the house was being rebuilt several times. So you had all that structural trash was maybe being thrown in a pit over there versus the other thing was the domestic trash, which was a pit there, and the rest perhaps was more of like a sheet midden, just the constant throwing out of garbage throughout the years. But the idea then is, how do we date this stuff? Like, how do we get, like, if we find a pit full of trash, how can we estimate like when that trash might date to? So there are several things, and they're not exacting or anything, but you can look, very broadly here. The evolution of ceramics throughout the 18th and the 19th centuries. So what happened is, like, for over 100 years, the English were trying to make pottery as good as the Chinese did, and it took them about 100 years to get there. But first they had creamware, which has a kind of creamy color. It's a very porous paste. So if you take a shard up and you put it on your tongue, it'll hang, because it's so porous, so it'll stick to your tongue. And then, but then by the end of the 18th century, they had come up with pearlware, which is more of a bluish tint, and the paste is finer. And then by the 19th century, they had whiteware, which is a much finer paste. It will not stick to your tongue. And I wouldn't say you should do that. Just I don't know. It's just something that happens if you're curious. Exactly. Yeah. From experience. Yeah. So and then there's and it's much more white. So what this means is if you find a pit and you've got only creamware, then you can kind of estimate that this is maybe from like the mid of the the 18th century. But if you have a pit that's only whiteware, then it's probably from like the second half of the 19th century. Now, this isn't to say that when pearlware came out, that everybody threw out all their creamware all at once. I mean, there's lagging there. You know what I mean? But it does provide a rough way to estimate age. Another thing is nails. I won't go into this too much, but there's so you can see the evolution of nails like through time. So if you've got your pit there of all creamware, but you get one wire nail in that pit, then you've got something was happening there. Sort of it's more complicated to try to interpret. Why am I not good at this? All right, so dating across the site. So this chart right here, it's a whole bunch of spikes, but there are some patterns here, all right? If you look at the yellow there as creamware, and then the blue as pearlware, and the red as a whiteware, you can see there's some pits that were probably all whiteware, meaning from like maybe the second half of the 19th century. There were a few that were all pearlware, which means they're maybe like early to mid 19th century, and then there maybe is one that's creamware, but the creamware stuff is much more mixed in, So if you look at that on a map, oh, that's what I just said. If you see it on a map, yeah, you can see how it's sort of spread out, where that hole over there in the southwest corner where you had most of the domestic debris, that would perhaps date to maybe like the early mid 19th century. So next, the vertical context. So we talked about space, right? We can see how there's like different areas where people are throwing out structural stuff versus their domestic stuff. We can see how the West Lawn was like the major area of where things were being thrown out. We can also see that things date to different time periods. So we can date to different parts of the yard to where things were being thrown out in maybe like the early 19th century, whereas like versus the later 19th century. But then, how do we interpret all of the stratigraphy? But first off, what is stratigraphy? I tend to use that word, like that, because I assume we all know what that means. But just assume that is stratigraphy, right? So archaeologists would call this the law of superimposition. All right, what that means essentially is the pasta on top was put there last. The pasta on the bottom was put there first, right? And so you can see so if you were to cut that down, so you could see like the age, so you could date. Well, you could also bore your date, I guess, but so you can like see, so the old stuff is at the bottom and the new is at the top. That's basically how stratigraphy works. It's much more complicated than that, but that's the basic idea of it. So what I did was, if you went to the there we go. All right. So if you look at the West Lawn, fortunately we only have profiles. That's when you like draw a map of the stratigraphy. We only have profiles for about 9 of the holes. But I tried to distill all of those profiles into one explanation, and so the top stuff is probably stuff that is related to the 1980s when the house was being rebuilt. So you get a lot of roofing nails or other types of nails, maybe window glass, plastic, bottle caps, cigarette butts, things of that sort. And then underneath that, there's a lot of debris from when the annex was built on the house. There was an extension of the house that was built on the north side. And so you get stuff that probably dates from that. And remember, I talked about the hole up here where you've got the dense thing of structural stuff. But then underneath that, and this is almost about 3 feet, it's quite deep. And there are levels there that date throughout the 19th century. And you can date those as you go down by the presence of the different types of ceramics that I was talking about. But then at the bottom in some holes, you can see the original land surface from when the Allens first probably moved there, and you can date that by there's lots of creamware there and certain types of nails and so on like that. So you can date that in some places. So that's a nice and simple sort of neat sort of thing. But what it actually looks like is this. Whoops, sorry. Is this, right? So it's very confusing, right? So I tried to break that down, but it does follow that basic pattern. Now this is one hole. This is just all 4 sides that have been mapped out, and this is the hole where they found that highest concentration of domestic trash. So if you look at the far left, you see all the dark band there at the bottom. That is the ground surface, probably from the 1780s. Where they found more like creamware and so on. So that's perhaps, and you see how it's curved? I'll talk about that at the end. But then as you go up, you have these levels as you go up are like you work through the 19th century up to the top there, where you have all of the trash from when the house was being remodeled. In the middle there, you see that's a giant pit feature. I don't know what that pit feature was. It's a bit too close to the house, I think, to have been a privy or something. But that was cut out and then is full of garbage, right? And so I didn't have time, and in the report they don't talk about this, but there are pit features like this all over the west lawn. Not all over, but they were there all around. So anyways, but that's what a pit feature would look like if you were to find it archaeologically. So next, go to the well over here, and as I said, it was found when somebody actually stepped into it, and so we don't have any profiles. So the stratigraphy is sort of up in the air for that, but they excavated a total of 16 holes around the well, and they estimate that the well was built in about the 1830s or so, and then it was abandoned by the 1920s. So obviously, the Allens had a well. We just don't know where it is at this point. But if you look here, the picture. Was it? Oh yeah, that was something I thought was odd, because that picture from 1900, I'm assuming, I'm going to reach over here, it was taken from around here. But you can't see the well in the picture. So I don't know if they're standing right in front of the well, or maybe the well was gone by that time, so it didn't like to.
I've seen a picture similar. It's in the folder, and not with you have to look. But I was aware of the well.
Oh, you were?
And
Okay.
you looking at, it was labeled a potato field, and you can see the well.
Oh, cool. I'd like to see that. Thank you. So anyway, so this was how they drew out, they dug down to where the well was, and they drew out a map, like a plan view it's called, to sort of show how the well looked. What they found was there's like a clay boundary around the well, and then they found where there were posts. So there were probably like a well house in there, that would have encased the well. And so the dates for it, you can see right here. I tried to interpret the dates just based off of where things were found, although we don't actually have a profile. But then if you look, so at the top you've got garbage from after the 1920s, and then there's the level from where it was covered up. And the way that they came up with the date from the 20s was because they found shells from a Winchester 30-30 and a penny from 21. So that's sort of so that was used to date the level that was put on top to cap off the well. Which is why they interpret that as being the end of when the well was being used. And then in the level underneath that, they found a large collection of ceramics that date from like the 1830s or so. So anyway, so that's the well. Now the eastern hayfield over here. Now this had been checked out by the University of Vermont several times in 79, 85, 88, I think it was. And there, what they said was that that whole field was all scrambled up essentially. So there was a tenant at the house named Brown, the Browns, and they apparently dozed the whole field in the 50s. So that barn, the barns you saw there, they all burned down in 1914. I assume there were still some of them left, and it was then dozed over in the 50s. And so the idea is that all of the deposits there were all scrambled up. However, what they found though was that this is just the history right there I gave you. What they found though, so they wanted to see if she could find any of the original structures there, as well as could she find if there was anything that was intact there. And what they found was there's a hayfield. They dug a hole right. Their holes were dug around there, I think. What they found on top, they found debutage. So these are like the stone, the remains when stone tools were being made. But that was on top, right? So that's probably because it was pushed there when the field was dozed. Because underneath it, what they found was structural remains from the late 19th century, and they found the full skeleton of a lynx, which is kind of sort of interesting. So what this means is that underneath that top level that's scrambled up, it was intact, because like the lynx skeleton would have been all scrambled up if it had been pushed around by the dozer. But because it was intact, that there is stratigraphy there that is still intact. So yeah.
There's a well in the picture with the,
Oh, is that it right there?
I assumed that was the well, maybe I'm wrong.
That's interesting. Well, we can pace it out. I can find it. We can try to figure it out. Thank you. That's great. I didn't even think of that. That's good. There we go. So next, the terrace. So she dug a few holes on the edge right there. The idea was to find out if people threw anything over, which I don't quite understand, because I assume if they did, it would be down the terrace. But so she dug on the edge of the terrace. And what she found here was the same sort of thing, that on top she found debutage and creamware, as well as plastic and so on like that. So I think probably what happened was that when there was the annex right here, and that was built in the 40s, and then there was also that was then moved in 85. So I assume that all of that land was being reworked, and that's why you have the oldest stuff on top. And then but then underneath that you find deposits that maybe date from when the house was being rebuilt in the 1840s. Sorry. Right. So you have the same thing there as you have in the hayfield, where you have like all of the disturbance on top, and it seals over older deposits. So now what I wanted to talk about is how can we place all of this within the overall context of what happened to the landscape here at Ethan Allen. And so we're on we're on a terrace that is surrounded to the east, sorry, to the east by the Winooski, and then we've got wetlands all around, and then the road over here. So you have this terrace that points out. So how was this land being used throughout the last 10,000 years? So throughout the Holocene, people have moved in small bands up and down the river here, right? And the way I try to talk about this just real simply is that, like me today, compared to them, I can eat an orange in February, right? Because that orange is brought to me from Florida or something like that. Because the food is brought to me, and I can bring the food home. They, however, for thousands of years, had to map themselves onto the landscape to go to where the food was, right? So they would split up into small bands and move around so maybe like 20 or so people, and move around the valley to where the food was. But then by April, their winter stores were quite empty. They were probably also very tired of having been with the same 20 people for the whole winter long. But at that same time, there are all these fish that are coming up the river to spawn, right? What's called anadromous fish. They come up to spawn. And so what they would do is, people for thousands of years would go down the river, and they would congregate in huge groups of several hundred people and fish, and there would be this great abundance of food for several months. And this here is a list of the various species of fish that would come up here. So we still, like today, we have the salmon hole, right? Which is named after this thing, this annual thing that would happen. So I don't know how things, but I can imagine maybe we had a scene like this out here at the homestead, with folks coming here every spring to fish. Maybe in huge groups or something like that, up and down this part of the valley. Oh yeah, that point over there I showed you. This is a drawing of it, dates back to about 5,000 or so years ago. But then, so the earliest evidence we have for farming in New England dates to about the 13th century. And the way that they farmed, as opposed to how we farm today, like we plow, they would have had these small mounds, and you would plant your corn, beans, and squash and so on in these mounds. And yeah, the men probably watched, because farming was probably invented by women, since they gathered plant foods, so they probably had a much greater understanding of how plants work, But anyways, yeah, so we probably had a landscape out here that looked like this. This is a shot from Northampton, Mass, from about 100 or so years ago, and you can see those mounds are still there, right? So that's perhaps how things looked here. Now, we don't know how many people were here at that time period. Estimates are going to range. It's mostly guesswork. I've read 4,000 to 5,000. I think it would probably be a lot more. But then in the 17th century, about 3/4 of that population died within one or two generations. And but then I don't know how, what was happening here when Ethan Allen first got here, how much of a stretch there was in terms of the land here being abandoned or left, or what was happening here. But I can guess that it probably looked a lot like things do now around here, in the sense that this whole state was farmed. And then a lot of those farms were abandoned, which means that most of the woods that we have today are quite young. So you can see here we've got a very young forest. So perhaps if the farms here had been abandoned during the 18th century, then by the time that the Allens came here, you had a very young forest like that around the property. So these here are some images to try to show how early homesteads might have looked, where there's still trees and they're clearing the woods. So maybe at the end of the the 18th century, things were sort of looking like this around here. So the changing contours. Now remember, I talked about how the the greatest concentration of stuff is in the west lawn. And so what happened is, like today, we walk into the house from the south end, because when the house was being rebuilt in the 1980s, they reshaped the house to make it look so that the entrance was on the south end, because the idea was that's how the house looked when it was first built. However, in the 1940s, I'm sorry, in the 1840s, the house was rebuilt, and the main entrance was put on the west side. Now, there had been this idea that that there was a porch out there, which you saw in those pictures, that was built in the early 19th century. But based off what was found at this dig, the idea is that no, it was probably not until the mid 19th century that porch was built, and that whole change happened. But it was after that that the west lawn became the main scene of action for the whole household. So that's why you see so much stuff there, because that was the focus of the home for, after 1840 until it was rebuilt in 85. But what I want to talk about is, so you can see that, so each line here, the contours is a foot. And so you can see the steep terrace walls on the north and south, and you can see there's a very slight incline as you go up towards where the house is, right? However, if you look at some of the profiles, so the red lines here show where we have profiles for like the north or south walls of the holes that were dug. And remember that hole I showed you that was right here, right? So this is the north wall. So you can see there's really a steep, it's about 25 degree slope that's going down, right? And you can also see it, this is the south wall of this place right here, but if you were to turn that around, you can see that the slope is there as well. So I think what you would have had is you can almost see it here, but there's probably, like now it's all flat. And if you go back to here, you can see how it's flat on top, right? But if you go here, you can see how, like, you almost have to walk up to the house, right? And so I think that when that house was first built, they probably came here and it was on a rise. There was a rise there, and that's why they I assume, chose to build the house in that place, because it was a higher rise to, like, walk up to it. It was slight, but it was still, it was the highest point throughout the whole property. Then through time, because that landscape has been so reworked over and over again, as we talked about how the house has been changed and so on several times, that, there's been a lot of trash that's been thrown out there, and they've reworked it and so on throughout all those years. So we've lost most of that slope. But if you were to come back here at the end of the 18th century, you would have seen a much more pronounced walk up towards the house if you're coming from the west. So I want to end. Oh yeah, so this is like a chronology here. And so to start with, in the 1780s, the Allens arrived, and as I just said, the house was probably on like a slight rise as you went up there. I just learned this trick where you can make things go away after you animate them to come on. So I showed my wife. I was like, check this out. She's like, Niels, I've been doing that for years. It's not a big deal, but I thought it was neat. So anyways, yeah, and then so throughout, going into the 19th century, once the Allens have left, you've got a succession of tenants coming in, and as we all know, when you move into an old house, you clear out all the old stuff. Maybe like you repaint the walls or something. Maybe you change a few things here and there. So you've got a succession of tenants, and they're all doing the same thing. They're changing that house every time that they maybe in small ways, but they're doing work to it. And maybe like they might want to throw out some of the old cutlery that was left there, or old pot or whatever. So that's all getting thrown out outside. So you see that process happening throughout the 19th century. We have the well built in the 1830s with the well house. Why am I so bad at this? There we go. Then the house was redesigned in the 1840s, as I talked about, and they changed the whole direction of the house from with the opening being on the south to the opening being on the west. And as I was saying before, there was a dig here that was done in '79 by UVM, and they said that they thought that the porch was built in the early 19th century, but based on how that material was reanalyzed in the report that was just done, it was probably built in the 1840s. But anyways, so you can see so there's a lot happening in that yard at that time. You get a lot of that structural debris from when the house is being rebuilt. And remember, there's that corner I showed you in the northeast part of the yard. We had that big pit of structural stuff. That all dates, I think, to when the house was being rebuilt in the 1840s. And then in the late 19th century, yeah, they also dug several holes out where all the black locust trees are. And in the report, they talk about those trees dating to back in the 19th century. I think the trees we have there would be the descendants of those trees, because a black locust tree is probably not going to live more than 80 years. I mean, it's a short-lived tree. But they found like pits and so on that maybe indicated how those trees were being planted. And then so the fire destroys all those structures in the eastern hayfield, and then there was and then the well is buried in the 20s, and then the annex on the north side of the house is built in the 1940s. And then the annex was, and then the east hayfield was bulldozed in the 1950s to make that whole yard, flat. And then we have when the homestead starts and it's rebuilt and all that. So the future. So we've done all this stuff, right? So we bag tagged and cataloged all of the artifacts. We have a digital database now. We have culled the collection. We have a report that provides context for what's there. So we can now submit this all to the Heritage Center, which means that it can then be kept in perpetuity, in good conditions and so on, so that somebody else in the future can go and start to look at it in more detail. So what we have is sort of like, we have the first maybe 4 chapters of the book, but there's more chapters to write, all right? So some ideas I have is like, that's garbage. I think I would have liked to work for like the sanitation department. I would have just loved to do like data on garbage. So what were the choices that people made at the homestead, over the last 250 years? Like, what did they consume, and how did their consumption change through time, and how is the homestead different from other farms in the state? So if you look here, let me show. There we go. So the farmstead is up there, and it's about an hour's walk to get to outdoor gear exchange for all of your outdoor needs. So it's like so that means it's a very short walk to get to Burlington, which is a major hub. You've got access by, I'm speaking in the present tense, but I mean back in the 19th century, you've got access to the railroad, to the lake, you know what I mean? So you're not a rural farm at all. So that means it can be very different than all the farms that we see today that you find throughout the woods when you see cellar holes and so on. The farm here is going to be very different. So how is it different? Another thing that's very interesting Now, this is a very rough chart, just drawn off of some work that was done to track all of the households and so on that were here. But when you, like, I spent a lot of time in my job mapping in all these old farmsteads throughout the woods in the state. They're everywhere, right? And when you look back through time, there's maybe one or two generations that lived at any of those, maybe one or two families. So there's not a lot of change, you know. But Ethan Allen here was farmed from the 1780s, so it was farmed for 200 years, and there are a lot of families, a lot of tenant farmers. They're coming in and out. So. So this is rough in that some of this is counting actually individuals, some is counting like families, but you can see an enormous amount of change. So how does that look to different compared to these farmsteads that you find in the mountains and so on, with just with one or two families, you know? So anyway, so these are some of the things I think are kind of would be interesting. If I was going to write a dissertation about this, which my wife told me not to do, I never finished mine. So she was like, "Don't go finish somebody else's." So, anyways, but these are some of the sorts of things I would want to check into. So anyway, so that's what I have. But I wanted to thank. Angie for putting this all together. It was a huge effort. It seems like it was, but it was a huge effort. So I want to thank her and all of the many people who took part in it. So thank you.
We are going to open the floor in just a minute for Niels to take questions. Before I do that, I did promise our Assistant Director, Angela, who's out at the front desk, that I would mention memberships, because she is in charge of memberships, and I always forget at these events. So how that connects to what Niels just presented, as he said, there are next steps. We would like to do an exhibition about these artifacts. I would love to have more signage outside with images, with some of the charts and timelines, so people can stand in the spot where the dig happened, where the lynx was found, where that well was. And all of this, of course, takes the support of a lot of people, takes volunteers, but it also takes funding. And one of the ways that you can support the Homestead Museum on an ongoing basis is by becoming a member. So if you're not currently a member, I would like you to consider it. There are sheets to sign up at the front desk, right, Angela? You'll handle that. So when Niels is done taking questions, you can talk to Angela about becoming a member and also joining our mailing list, so you can hear about future events and future fundraising efforts we have for this. Okay, and
Sorry, forgot.
yes, we also would like to thank, well, there were two major funders for the 3-year project that Niels just presented about. And so we would like to thank the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership and Vermont Humanities, both of which who awarded us grants to complete some of this work. So thank you to them. Okay. Niels,
Great.
questions? Yeah. Anybody have any questions for Niels?
Cool, I was actually by like 45, well,
You were
50
perfect
minutes.
on time,
Wow,
yeah.
okay. Good for me. You first, sir.
Do you think they changed the orientation of the house because of filling out the yard? Like, had they flattened out what was in
At that time?
direction, and so they changed it so they could start throwing stuff out, or was it?
I don't know, but I can make something up. But no, I mean, it's a good question, so I don't know. I hadn't thought of why. I think that it was more of an architectural thing, like the style in which the house is built in the 1780s was typical of that time period, and they wanted to build a house, to make the farm look like the style that was popular, in the, so I think that maybe was as to why they switched the entrance to the west lawn. I don't know to what extent that might have been a part of that want to change the style of the house, so I don't know. But so you're asking, like, did they do it because to enable them to throw out garbage in another place?
Yeah, just.
Yeah,
curious.
that's great, yeah, because it might have been that maybe that, it was such a mess out front, they wanted to change the front yard.
Or they flattened out and they wanted to walk up to the house.
Yeah, so I don't know, I hadn't thought of that. It would be interesting. I mean, I think the way I would attack that would be to look at the structural, like why the structure was changed to create the new architectural style. Like how did that reorientation fit into the mold that they're trying to put the house into? You know what I mean? That's maybe the way I would look at that. But yeah, it could be maybe that could play a role in terms of where they wanted to throw stuff out. So I hadn't thought of that. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Were there any barns built in Ethan Allen's era? Any evidence of foundations?
There isn't any, I mean, he obviously had some, he must have had something, but I don't know to what extent, so there isn't any evidence archaeologically at this point for where those outbuildings might have been. I don't know to what extent, like you saw in that picture there's that almost like an L-shaped thing in the eastern hayfield. I don't know which one of those might have been actually a structure that dated back to then. You know what I mean? Because some of those could.
I've heard that they do believe one of those in that old photo
Was the original?
The original 18th century barn.
Right.
But I don't know why someone said that, and now it's just been passed down as oral history among
Right, yeah.
So,
But I think
don't
it
know
would.
if that's true or not.
But it would be interesting, like Angie had talked about, or we talked about maybe doing what's called ground penetrating radar, or GPR if you're hip. But where it's a thing where you can like drag it across the ground and it'll read, it'll make an image that will show where there might be structures or pits or things like that underground. So it would be neat to maybe to be able to do a map like that. I mean, it's a flat field, so it's a prime candidate for this sort of thing, to like try to find, to map out where those structures were. And you could then use a map like that to start to try to answer the question that you're asking, like which one of these, like so you could like strategically place holes in certain spots to try to date, when those structures might have been built, to try to recreate that landscape. The thing I would love to find would be the privies, because that's where you find like the real treasure trove of garbage. Yeah, they would throw stuff out in the privy, so to find Ethan Allen's privy, I guess, would be the goal. But anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. One of them just came up.
Right.
But my first question was when they filled in the original well,
Right.
Or the well that was found, where is the new well, or did they dig a new well? And
Yeah.
the second question is, you talked about the ground penetrating
Radar. Yeah.
I'm actually just started watching this show on Netflix or something, or Amazon Prime, that's a BBC show called The Detectorists.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
if anybody heard of
Wonderful
it.
show.
I just found.
Don't do it, but it's fun to watch. It's a good show.
So I was wondering, has any of that been done here?
No, but that
Officially.
would be a
With
neat way to do it.
permission.
Yeah, no, but that would be a neat thing to do, to try to track, to map out densities of stuff across the field, to get to yeah. So if you were to do both the GPR and something like that, sort of get an idea of like where the hits are, and you then can create like a density map of the whole thing. So. Yeah, that would be neat. But your first question?
Oh, a replacement well.
A replacement well.
Original well.
I don't know.
Oh.
I'm sure there was one here, and I don't know why they closed that well off. Maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but I'm sure that they must have had one, because there's no plumbing that ever went into the house, right? Was there?
At some point.
No, they put in plumbing?
I believe so. I believe the families that lived there in the 1970s had plumbing.
Oh, they did.
But I was just assuming that because I assume most people in the 1970s had plumbing.
Yeah, they
Now
might.
that you mention it, I don't know if there's actually architectural evidence of that. I'll have
So
to-
I think the first thing to do to answer your question would be find out when was the plumbing put in.
Right.
And you could use that to answer, like, maybe they sealed up the well because they got plumbing. That might have
I really quick just
been
want
it.
to add something in there, and I know there's another question.
Sure.
But another project that we've been working on for the last 3 years is architectural history of the Allen House, and trying to basically excavate and figure out that information, just like with these digs. 'Cause
Right.
They did the major restoration work in the 1980s, and we're trying to figure out what was original, what was brought in then. And those projects have been so hand in hand because they answer each other's questions.
Right.
So like to answer the question of the well, we need to know when was plumbing brought into the house, which we don't know yet because we need to work more on that architectural history of the house too. So we have these ongoing projects that are really complementary. So
Sure.
we keep focusing back and forth between the two of them.
Right. Yes, sir. You had a question?
So the well that's out there now is just something somebody built to look like a well?
No, I mean, that is the original well. The wood thing around it, I don't know when that was built. That was probably built in the last 30 or so years, I guess. But no, but that is the well that was built in the 1830s. I don't know to what extent that they had to reconstruct it, but that is, the actual well.
Filled in by dirt and then they
Well,
put-
it would appear from what I saw in the notes that it was not filled in, they just like covered it over with something, and that's why the person fell in when they walked over it. So maybe it was capped off. Like I remember when we moved into our old house, my kids were like that, and I didn't know there was a well in the backyard with a little cap over it. My kids were going up and down because it was bouncing. And then I went out there, I was like, stop! And I realized it was a well cover that was like you couldn't see it, but it was like going like that. So I'm assuming it was like that sort of a thing.
And Niels,
but-
will you be staying around a little bit longer?
Sure,
if anyone has
absolutely.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And so Niels will be staying around if you have more questions. We also have some volunteers who are working at the artifact tables out in the lobby. So you can actually see some of the artifacts that our volunteers recently rebagged and labeled. And also our volunteer Rich right here in the doorway, he set up our snack table today. So thank you to Rich for that as well.